Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Piercing the Cosmic Veil show. I'm Corey Andrews, and I'm a co-host. And Joe, you take it over.
I'm Joe Jordan. I'm the co-founder of CE4 Research Group. Along with us today, we have Lee Aaron from Australia, down under. I myself from South Korea. And our guest today is Stacy Jones from mid-Texas.
The great state of Texas.
Great state of Texas. Is that a country yet? I've heard there's still
It
trying
is.
for that.
Essentially, it is.
Essentially, it is. You think it is when you drive across it.
We haven't seceded yet. I don't think we will. Right.
Yeah, when you drive across
Exactly.
it, you swear it's a country. This very special guest today. Quite an accident that I came across this lady. I was just going through Facebook pages, the UFO pages, trying to spread our information out there and share it with the world. And I was on a page that I don't even think I was familiar with. And I was looking at the feed going on there, and somebody had mentioned something going on. They'd actually mentioned something about my work. And then somebody responded and said that, oh yeah, I was familiar with that work and actually wrote about them in my book. And I'm looking at this going, wrote about them in my book? Who are you and what's the book? So I had to know what was going on here. So I went over and looked at the profile, and I thought, I don't know this person. I don't know this book. So I went over to the messenger side and made a contact. And I talked to this beautiful lady here, and we got to talking a little bit. She shared her book with me, and had to have her on the show. This is something I wanted to do for many years, but it was just not my ability to put something like this together. What she has done here has been able to share the truth, like we have, about this phenomenon, about what it is, and about how to be free from it in a way that I wanted to do originally, but I ended up doing it in a factual way. But the way I wanted to do it was in a fictional way, to get people's attention, to get them to read a fictional story, and to be able to get them to hear the truth in the end. But Stacy was able to do that. And I wanted to make sure that the world got the opportunity to read her story. And it's available on Amazon. And I want to let her talk about her book and give you all an opportunity to hear what this is about, and an opportunity to go and purchase her book and take a read for yourself. Stacy, welcome
Absolutely.
to the show, and take it away.
Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, all of you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what I've learned. I know that, Joe, you've done a lot of research in the area of alien abductions and its relationship to the power of the name of Christ. So you came upon your conclusion based on research, whereas I essentially came to the same conclusion, but not based on research, based on experience. I'm an experiencer. And so I thought it would be best if I started with a little background information about myself, just to establish some credibility that I'm sane. Mm-hmm. I'm a normal human being like all of you. And to give you a sense of who I am, because I think there's power in story. When you can tell them someone your story, they connect. There's some common factor, no matter where the story is coming from, no matter where in the world you are, we're all connected by story. So I'll start by mentioning where I was born and raised. I did not begin in Texas. I actually began in Northern California. I was born in the mid-70s. My mother's family they were immigrants from Switzerland. And I have a funny story about how when my grandfather came over on the boat, he'd never seen a banana before. He proceeded to eat it. He ate the entire thing, including the peel. Oh. Luckily, his children did not go in the same manner that he did, education-wise. Very well educated. His first son went on to receive a PhD in botany, so he learned a lot more about plants. He's got some recognition in science. He's traveled worldwide and helped different societies with their agricultural problems and whatnot. I have an aunt who has actually been my substitute teacher at one point when I taught middle school math and science in California as a public school teacher many years ago, 20 years ago. So she was well educated. And then there was my mother, not by any means well educated, the baby of the family. And she had the nickname Chatty Maggie. And she's still chatty Maggie to this day. When she calls, I have to hold the phone about a foot away. She's loud, boisterous. And that's actually how she came to meet my father, who was from much humbler beginnings. He's of African-American religion. We did some ancestry DNA and found that we're from the west coast of Africa. No idea about the actual places because of the slave trade. But he was born in New Jersey and grew up in Virginia with something to the likes of 8 to 13 siblings on a farm.
Wow.
He was hunting, running a store at the age of 5. Very independent. He did not graduate high school. He went on instead to join the Marine Corps. And one night he thought he was going somewhere on the East Coast. They shipped him instead to California. He had no clue where he was going. He landed, met with some buddies. He was poking his head out the window of the barracks and he heard someone. And he turned to one of his friends and said, "Who is that loud woman?" It was my mother. She'd come to meet some Marines. They were dating, courting. She didn't come to meet him, but essentially they met up. She couldn't stand him because he was very quiet and reserved, boring in her mind. And she was quite the opposite. But I had a very secure childhood, in education. People encouraged me to get an education. I didn't have major trauma in my childhood. The neighborhood I grew up in was very diverse. There was no racism. We had kids outside, unlike today where they're all on Xbox, but outside from morning till night. So my life consisted of school and playing outside until the street lights turned on. So there was no trauma. And I hear a lot of times when I'll talk to people that have had experiences that trauma is a common factor. But I want people to know that you can have an experience regardless of where you started, what your background was. Now, like any other human, I had problems. I was very, as I said, well educated, did great in school. I won the district spelling bee. I'll just say school was easy for me because I want to be humble about it, but it always came really, really easy. Self-esteem did not. I considered myself one of the ugly ducklings. Church was not a part of my upbringing. I think the only time I ever heard about God as a child was my father would, every time we had dinner, make us say grace. And it was the same prayer every dinner, which didn't really have a lot of meaning. It was, God is good, God is great, thank you for this food we're about to eat, amen. And we went on with our lives, living like any other, all-American kid. Once I reached teenage years, like others, I became interested in not only playing outside, but boys, HBO, Showtime. I was exposed to a lot of secular TV. And I think it's important to note that sometimes what you let your children watch, because I have children myself, 2 teenage children, can have a very impactful, it can take them on a route. It puts an imprint in their mind. What you're exposed to, I can think about things that I saw. We had friends who would come over and they would have the chip that they could put in the back of the VCR, this is in the 80s, that would allow us to watch anything we wanted. And I won't get saucy and talk about what we watched. I have to be appropriate because of my career, but we could watch anything we wanted. And those were imprinted in my mind quite well. And not having been raised in the church, I thought that was perfectly normal. What I saw was what people should do. It's what goes on to become your carnal desire. And whatever you see is what you eventually crave. So at being a mom myself now, I'm very careful about what I let my children watch. I don't censor things, but I'm always talking to them about what they're seeing, what they should think about it, giving them my point of view because I know that it can be impactful. That's cool. So I'll go on. I'm going to skip the ages of 8 to 17 for a moment because there were some really interesting experiences that happened between 8 and 17, but those will make much more sense once I get to the part where we'll say the sky unzipped and reality became different than what I thought it was. During my last year of high school, I received a scholarship, or was invited to receive a scholarship, but declined it because it was a Swiss scholarship. And I thought, I don't have blonde braids. I don't look like Heidi. If I go out on stage, they'll wonder, who is this girl? Where's she from? How did she get the scholarship? So I just thought I'll pay for college on my own. I took a route that was probably not the best route, but I wanted to help my parents out. So I went to a school where I paid 2 years of community college and then transferred to a state college where I met my husband at the age of 19. Now he was from he had a strong family. They were originally from Texas and Georgia. So they've got the Southern family vibe going, regular churchgoers. When I initially met him, I had a best friend in high school who was a Christian. I met her one day in honors classes. We're the only kids at the school that had to do homework during the summer. So we're kind of complaining about the fact that we have to do more than others. And she invited me to church one night. We got to know each other very well. We're still friends to this day. She's an attorney who lives on the East Coast. So I met my husband. Just like my mother was kind of bored by my father, I was a little bored by him. They called him Rev because he was serious, very practical, no nonsense. He was into football, and he was actually a really nice guy. My parents fell in love with him. He went on to move to a different school. So we had a long distance relationship for about 6 years. And during that time, I started thinking, what exactly do I want to do with my life? So I was working for the YMCA in an after-school childcare program because as the oldest child, I had a twin who passed away at the age of 4. She had a rare form of cancer, but other siblings came along. I have a sister, brothers, and I was always playing the role of teacher. So I thought, okay, this could be a fun job while I'm in college. I can, get kids involved in projects. I'm great at the art of fun. It's something we did all day. We played outside. I knew how to keep the party going, so to speak. So I went to the Career Center, took a test, and it popped out a couple of choices, and I saw advertising, teacher, and I don't remember what the third one was, but I immediately thought advertising, it's not for me. I don't like lying to people. I could care less about commercials. The teaching, I can do that. It sounds fun. I've always enjoyed being around children. It just fit. It fit perfectly because I was the eldest in the family and had already taken on that role. So after about 2 years of teaching in California, math and science, middle school, I was married eventually after the 6-year long distance relationship, and he and I moved to Texas. And about 3 years later, I had my first child. Somewhere right before that, I did end up getting baptized, and I'll go into the story of how I met Christ when I get to the UFO because it'll make much more sense. But we had about 3 years where we had a very ho-hum lifestyle. He was a bank manager. I had my career. Things were just totally normal until 2008. I was driving home one night, and I decided to go home a different way. It was a beautiful, clear night. My 2-year-old and 1-year-old were asleep in the back of the car. I thought, you know what, I'm not in a rush. I'm going to take my time and enjoy some sightseeing, just drive around. I would have normally turned left to head home, but instead turned right. And that's when I immediately noticed a string of lights in the sky. I'd say it was, if you're running a 100-meter dash, fairly close. So I'm watching what looks like 8 white orbs traveling slowly, then backing up. And the whole time I'm thinking, okay, I've taught middle school science before. Those can't be drones. They don't move mechanically. They were very organic, almost like a bird would move. They floated, they danced. They eventually turned sideways and spelled out a letter O. And being the curious type, I decided, okay, this is interesting. I have to go see what this is. I'm not going to watch it forever, but I've got to go find out what it is, get even closer to it, study it. So I drove the car a little further. By this time, the object had moved over right above a movie theater that was called Tinseltown at the time. It suddenly morphed into what looked like a disco ball. Not a metallic one, but one completely composed of light. It was throwing off colors in different directions. By now, I'm fascinated. I'm hooked. So I continued driving, and I thought, I'm going to get right underneath it. How else do you study something you've never seen? So I turned right, and I do have quite a sense of humor. So I rolled down the window. I saw one gentleman who was standing kind of near the theater doors, and I yelled out, "There's a UFO." He couldn't hear me. He didn't pay any attention. He was wearing a long black trench coat. I remember thinking, it's not cold out. Why is he wearing such a long coat? He was looking past it, and I drove toward it. I drove right up under it, where I was slightly, a couple feet to the left, and it was literally above the treetop. And my jaw dropped. I was in shock. If I had had an iPhone at that time, I would have been taping it. I didn't have an iPhone. I don't think I got one until about 2010. But here I am, mother of 2, staring at something I'd never seen. And it was mind-blowing because I kind of did a multiple choice type activity in my mind. Could it be A, B, C, D? It can't be a plane. It can't be a drone. I'm looking at it. It's swimming with pink color. It looks like something alive. It has a green perimeter. And as I sat there and stared at it, I was suddenly taken back to when I was 8 years old and something that happened. So I'll go back to the 8 to 17. This will make complete sense. I was in a teacher's class. I'm not afraid to say her name because I went back and visited her since. Miss Jackson, one of my favorite teachers, 3rd grade. We were singing Christmas songs. At that time in the 80s, you were still allowed to sing Christmas songs in public school, but we were singing in Spanish, Feliz Navidad. And I remember her saying, don't lock your knees or you might pass out, because we're going to be practicing for a while. So the kids are singing, we're having a great time singing songs. And then suddenly something strange happens. Now, let me remind you, I've never been to a church. I've never heard about visions. I have no concept of anything that's outside of physical reality at this point. I see a screen in front of me. It's rectangular and it has words traveling around it that say no place like home. And the reason I went back to that is because the rate of speed the words were going around this thing was exactly what the green perimeter was doing. I thought, this is moving the same way that thing did I saw a long time ago. And I remember I was a kid that walked back and forth to school. I ran home that day, wrote in my journal, I saw something weird today in Miss Jackson's class. I never really made much of it. I just thought maybe other people see strange things too. I've never tried drugs in my life. I don't think I drank until my mid-30s because my father didn't allow alcohol in the house. I think maybe in his ancestry, his father might have perhaps had problems with alcoholism, so he didn't allow it. We had a beautiful cabinet that had some tiny little liquors that was not opened for the 25 years I lived in that house. It was just for decor. So I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew that there was a connection between what happened then and what was happening in the sky. And my son in the back, who I kind of thought he was sleeping because his eyes were closed, he pointed up and said, ship. And I'm thinking, he's 2. I don't let my kids watch a lot of TV. Being that I was a middle school teacher, I saw a connection between plugging them into electronics and them having a struggle to pay attention in school. So I thought, I'm not going to let them watch much TV until they can read and we can talk about what they're seeing. And I thought maybe my husband showed him a show with aliens and he thinks it's a spaceship. I didn't go past that. I raced home at that point. I thought, I've got to show my husband. I need somebody else that I know to see this. Because at that time, there was just the guy with the trench coat. And then some people off in the distance that looked like they were going to see a movie, but they were dressed in almost prom wear, as if they were going to a senior prom, junior prom. So I went to my house and told my husband, I've just seen something really weird. You need to go and see this. And I was excited. He kind of stood back and said, are you okay? I've seen something weird. You got to come see what I've seen. So he got in the car. We drove back to the movie theater, which was only about maybe a 10-minute drive, and there was nothing there. So that was the beginning of my ridicule from him, because he's practical, and if he's not seen it, it's not to be discussed. He told me, don't tell people about this. They're going to think you're crazy. Just let it go. Now, it would have ended there had I not begun to see more of them. And some of the things that also happened between 8 and 17 went from being something that I thought were just dreams, sleep paralysis. They manifested in physical reality. I could start seeing things. So I'll go back a little ways again. I'm kind of backing up to make sense and connections. When I was about 14, the kids in my neighborhood were various religions. We had Hindu children, Catholic, a wide variety, some that were atheist. We didn't care what religion anyone was. We just wanted to play ball together, play tag. We didn't really discuss topics like that. But about the age of 14, I remember my mother going to a play downtown. And in the Bay Area, at one point, they did have a problem with gangs. Some of the people that were running this play were former gang members who had been transformed by Christ. So they were putting on a play to kind of bring the community together, show them the message of the gospel. So my mom thought it would be great entertainment to go see this play. We sat down in the seat, and I remember something strange happening after the drama of people being shot and them discussing hell and what could happen to you after you die, which I'd given no thought to. Literally the only time I thought of religion was when I said the grace and thought, okay, we're supposed to say grace. And when I'd seen Anne of Green Gables saying a prayer on TV. So what happened was I was sitting there and suddenly I felt this magnetic pull when they gave an altar call. They basically said, if you died tonight, where would you be? And I hadn't thought of that. You know, I'm a good kid. I make great grades. I'm first chair in wind ensemble. This is a lot. These are things I hadn't considered. But I've seen some weird things. I've seen something appear in front of me. Maybe there's something that I don't know. Now, I was pretty shy back then. When we had to give speeches, I was the kid that you'd have to pull the speech out of. I did not want to be the center of attention walking down the aisle when they called for people that wanted to accept the free gift of eternal life. But the pull was so strong. It was literally as if someone had a magnet and I was a large piece of metal. Everything in me was being drawn to the front. So there's my mind going, okay, this is important. You need to accept Christ tonight, or what happened to them could happen to you. It wasn't even a fear thing. It was, you need to do this. Mm. So tears flooding my eyes. My mom was just sitting there and she's clapping. She had not become a born again Christian at this point. Tears flooding my eyes. I walked down the aisle. There were probably hundreds of people that went down the aisle at this theater. And we began saying a prayer together. You know, I confessed that I'm a sinner. That was very easy to say after the play, and them talking about things that you're not supposed to watch on TV, things that you're not supposed to say. I thought I do all those things. I pretty much covered the gamut. I haven't done drugs, but I can tell that I'm not as perfect as they say you need to be, because they mentioned that to get to heaven, you had to be perfect. And I'm thinking in my mind, I might be first chair wind ensemble, but I can tell you right now, I'm not perfect, nor have I ever met anyone who was. This is impossible. So I'd better jump on this train before it's too late. So I admitted that I was a sinner. They said, simply talk to God, tell him that you accept the free gift, you accept what Christ did for you. It's a free ticket to heaven. Do you want it? So I confessed. And a woman came over to me and she said, if you died tonight, you would go to heaven. And I kind of had this happy sense. I hadn't heard about baptism at that point, but I thought, okay, I've done something I need to do. I've accepted the free gift. So I went home that night, opened my diary because I loved writing, and wrote saved age 14. After that, I think I bounced between being saved, not sure if I was saved, because life went on. As a child in public school, I listened to secular music. I was very interested in boys. I did pretty much anything that you can think a teenager might do who has a carnal body, a fleshly body. So there was this kind of a tension between my upbringing, secular, some would call it heathen. I was just a normal kid. And I began reading the Bible, and everything that it was saying to do, I found was in contrast to what felt natural. It says not to do this, but this feels right. It says not to do this, but this feels right. So there was a constant awareness of sin.
Right. Yeah.
And I had a little black and white TV. I remember at night, I would actually, I had a U channel. I don't know if y'all remember the dials back then, but it would go to the U. Don't remember exactly what channel, but I kind of flip around. I ran into the 700 Club. I would watch that literally every night. Every prayer they said, I would say it. I would tune in. I would listen. I would read my Bible. I think I read it 4 or 5 times within a few months. I was a fast reader. Not that I understood it all, but I read it and I took the words to heart. And then I'm glad I did, because there were more things that happened after that. When I was about 15, my neighbor, wonderful woman, she actually came to visit me as an adult over in Texas. She invited me to go with her to a church. My parents said, that's fine, you can go. They were open-minded. But this was not a normal church. Services were extremely long. However, I felt that same feeling that I felt when I stood up for the altar call, which now I have an opinion that it's the Holy Spirit, but there are people that have various perspectives. Some say it's just highly emotional. I can understand varying perspectives, but I was drawn because I felt like it was a place I should be. And I'm glad that I was, because one night there was a gentleman that came to visit, and it was a small place. There weren't rich people there. Most of them had pretty old cars. An African-American man was leading their congregation, and they had a visitor who was a prophet. And there are many perspectives. In my own household, there are some that believe gifts of the Spirit are for today, some that believe they're not. I can completely identify with all points of view. So I'm sitting there in the chair, and I started thinking, you know, it would be really cool if he could say something to me. I don't even know if this is real, but I wish he would say something to me. And I don't know why. Maybe because I'd watched 700 Club. Under my breath, I began kind of whispering, blood of Jesus, blood of Jesus, blood of Jesus, just saying it and thinking about how Christ had covered me and begging God to say something to me. And then there were, maybe 80 people at the most. He turned my way and he said, you young lady, stand up. And started to tell me some things, asked me a question about someone, and told me to be careful that people would be sniffing for me. He named a name that was very unique. He said, who is Henri? And I'm thinking, do you mean honoree, the spelling word, somebody that's mischievous? I don't know what he means. So I just sat there and looked at him and shook my head. But later I went on to meet this person. There was a boy at our school who was about 17. And one night he came over, and mind you, by this point I knew that fornication was wrong. You shouldn't do things of that nature until you're married. So he leaned into my ear and said, Henri wants to get it on. And I'm thinking, how did he hear that name? This is a new kid. He's obviously attracted to me. I'm not going to engage in this. And I remembered what the guy had said, be careful. People will think when he asked who is Henri. Now, being a critical thinker, I thought he could have known this kid. He could have flown the kid in. I'm thinking maybe they're part of some secret society. But that stuck with me, that perhaps something from the spiritual realm could communicate with someone and it could give you wisdom, be it lies or truth. There might be something more than this physical reality. So cutting forward, there was another place that I visited, which was up the street from our house. There was a blind center where there were about 7 or 8 people that would meet there pretty much for worship. They were non-denominational. They sang songs. They studied their Bibles. And the woman one night said, the Lord is asking me to relay something to you. You're going to see something strange. This is when I'm 17, by the way. I see a light coming out of the sky. She went on to describe what I understand is the first UFO. She mentioned that they're watching you. I see red eyes. You have the sign of the cross on your forehead. And I would go to her oftentimes when I had an issue with something I didn't understand, ask her questions about what she thought, and she would always refer me to the Bible. So before I left for college, I knew, okay, there's this Bible. She's shown me there are answers in it. I've got that. And life went on. Now, cutting back to the UFOs. By this time, I was married, baptized, had children. I began to see them in my backyard. Orbs, white orbs that would float over the house. And the really interesting part was the first one, before I got up really close, I wasn't sure what it was. When they started coming closer, I was convinced that they could not be physical craft. The first time I'd seen one, I went home and researched. I think I stayed up for 3 nights straight researching. That's when I actually ran into Joe back in 2008. I'd read about a website. Started reading testimonies. I heard so many stories that by this time I thought, wow, there's a lot in the bathwater there. Some of this is just outlandish. People are claiming they're abducted by aliens. This is the night that I saw the first one. This is weird. It doesn't fit with what I understand is reality. But at the same time, this is real. And I began having instances of sleep paralysis. I can remember distinctly, and I thought it was physical at this point, completely physical. It's just something that happens when you're asleep. Maybe you're lying on your hand, the blood loss is drastic. You might dream that an entity is sitting on your hand. So I chalked it up to there has to be a physical explanation for these black shadowy beings that will attack me sometimes. So one night it got pretty intense. I wasn't actually sure whether this was sleep paralysis or I was in between sleep, but I could literally see the silhouette. He came up and began choking me. And I could feel that I was dying. It was a coldness that started from my feet, crept up my legs to my knees, just kept going higher and higher. And the whole time I'm thinking, if this feeling gets to my head, I'm dead. I will not see my children again. I need to make this thing stop. They'd never attacked me to the point where I felt like I was going to die. It was usually a wrestle. And I didn't quite know what to do about it. So I thought, maybe I need to remind him of who I belong to. Maybe it's demonic. That thought went through my head. So I said, blood of Christ. Blood of Christ was kind of my mantra by this time. Blood of Christ. Leave. You're not welcome here. And it disappeared. And I thought, okay, that worked. Since that time, I've not seen another. But my child began seeing things. My daughter, who's pretty intelligent, she was identified as gifted and talented, came into my room one night and said, Mom, there's something in the bathroom. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe she was dreaming, sleepwalking. I said, were you asleep? No, I've been awake. I didn't go to sleep yet. I walked into the bathroom and there's a boy and girl in the bathtub. They're standing up and they're staring at me. So of course I'm thinking, is this her imagination? I need to go in there and look and see what she's talking about, at least honor the fact that she's telling me this so that she can trust me to believe what she's saying. So I went in and I said, are you sure it's not your reflection you saw? Because she could understand the vocabulary. You didn't see your body being reflected off the tiles. She said, no, one was a boy, one was a girl. She described the girl, black silhouettes. They were facing each other. Then they turned and looked at her. So that was the point in time where I thought, okay, I know Christ. These things that are happening in my dreams are obviously manifesting into her reality. There's a possibility of it. Maybe as a good parent, I need to give her some tools. So I said, let's pray. We're going to, if there was something there, we're going to tell it that it's not welcome here. We're going to cast it out. And I began to teach her a little about how Christ used to cast out demons. They're here to deceive people. They're here to cause fear, to distract you from your past. So we're going to make them leave. She agreed. We prayed. She didn't have an issue with it. We went out to the backyard and sat on a blanket. And I remember her and I holding hands, and I said, I need to pray that she will understand the supernatural realm, because if they can attack people, if they can manifest in reality, because I was seeing tons of UFOs by this time, she needs some sort of protection. And some of the websites I'd researched, I noticed they all had a common theme. They led into New Age ideas. They would say burn sage, or they had various ideas of how you could make this type of phenomenon stop. Exactly. But I thought, this doesn't really line up with what the Bible teaches. It doesn't line up. So there was that, I need to do something to help her out. I need to give her some tools. So we prayed. I remember distinctly sitting on a blanket in the backyard. Lord, will you please give her an awareness of the supernatural realm, so she will be aware of what to do if something attacks, or if something is trying to distract her from your path. And I have to say, I was not raised in the church. I didn't really push that on my kids. I didn't make them go to church. And in my mind, part of me says I should have. They're teens at this point. But I did tell them my thoughts. We read the Bible together. I've taken them a few times, but I wanted them to not feel like they were brainwashed necessarily. And I wanted them to be able to come to me with anything they had to say, and I would listen to their ideas. But at the same time, I knew that if there is a demonic realm, what kind of parent would I be if I didn't prepare them for how to deal with it? I'm not going to send them off into the world not having any tools. So as we finished the prayer, I said, remember, we need to say in Jesus' name. It's kind of like the cherry on the cake. It's not because we're good. It's because of what Christ did. We have the power to overcome evil because of what he did, in Jesus' name. And suddenly a pink orb materialized. Now at this time I'm thinking, I don't know if this is malevolent. It's something demonic. I don't know if it's something angelic, because I've read verses about flames of fire. My mind was very confused. And at the same time, I thought, God is not the author of confusion. So there was a lot of controversy. And to this day, there's still some tension where I think, okay, he could manifest in some way that I'm not aware of. But that doesn't mean I'm going to trust every spirit or believe that what I'm seeing is necessarily for my good. So she knew it was real. But then we had my husband, who was the practical, hadn't seen it. This is not real. We don't talk about this. People are going to think you're crazy. So this went on for years. And that's when I decided, you know what? He won't talk to me about the UFO phenomenon. It's not in his sphere of understanding. He doesn't want anything to do with it. I wasn't interested in aliens, UFOs as a child or a young adult. I remember my uncle taking me to a Star Wars movie, and I fell asleep within the first 5 minutes. I had no interest in that. So I thought, I can understand why he doesn't care about this UFO stuff, especially considering all the stories you hear about abductions and all the weird things that people are saying. So I thought, I need to connect with people that know something about this phenomenon, which can be dangerous when you do it behind your spouse's back. So I started to look for people online. I actually met a person who had seen the same thing that I saw above the movie theater, because I kept looking up, did you see it in this place? Met her, went to UFO conventions. And that's when I started to notice that all these people who were having experiences similar to mine were troubled. Not crazy, but I met one woman, for example, at one UFO conference, where she told me a story about how entities had been plaguing her since childhood. She'd started drawing pictures of different races. And the whole time I'm thinking, this could possibly be demonic, because it's not in her best interest. They're trying to harm her. It's also not leading her toward Christ. So I had that knowledge of Christ and him being the way, the truth, and the life. I don't see any good in this. I don't see how it's helping people. And then you have groups like, well, I don't want to mention groups because I don't want to tarnish names, but there are groups out there that actually have sightings. They can call on orbs.
Yes.
They attribute them to being ascended masters. They're real. They're having real sightings. They're seeing these things. And I think the reason I'm most passionate about this is because I think eventually everyone will start to see these things.
Stacy.
Yes.
Pause right there. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come right back on that note. Okay?
Sure. Absolutely.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to finish up with Stacy Jones, and we left off where she's was talking about the different types of groups that she had come across. Stacy, take it away.
Yes, I'd encountered many different types of people. I'll give a couple examples because I think this is really important in developing an understanding of what's going on. One of the women, like I said, was very troubled. So that started to paint my mindset pretty firmly that it could be demonic, but at the same time, I'm open-minded. Maybe something's going on with her that I don't understand, but from my perspective, it's demonic. And when I went to one of the conferences, I've been to about 2 or 3, and with various motives, sometimes to go visit people that I'd met, friends. But when I went, I ran across a woman in the parking lot who was a self-proclaimed psychic. Now, I had my own views on what psychics were. As a kid, I'd seen fake psychics on TV. I thought it was all fun and games. It's funny. But I'd also had this extra bit of knowledge. I'd read enough of the Bible to know that if someone is being spoken to from another realm, perhaps they know a lot because they're hearing it from a realm that knows a lot. So I decided I was going to sit next to her when we went into the meeting. And with the intent that I would get her perspective, share mine, and maybe change her mind about her practice. And I'm not a judgmental type of person, but I wanted to hear what she had to say. And being a Christian, at this point, I thought I've got to let her know what's going on, what I think is going on because of things that I've seen and things that I'll tell you about that I saw. So we sat down, listened throughout the conference. Afterward, everyone headed over to a barbecue place. I would not eat the food. I was afraid that maybe they'd put LSD in it. Being from California, I was warned as a child, you don't drink anything that's left out. You don't eat things from people when you're at weird places. And I thought a lot of these people are telling me stories that are just outlandish. I can't, it doesn't vibe with me. I don't know how much of the bathwater needs to be thrown out. So I'm going to just sit and listen to these people talk, share my experiences. I was engaged in this UFO thing. Again, no interest as a child, but it took over. I would research it. I would talk about it. I told everyone I knew about it. I wrote on Facebook about it. I wrote a book about it eventually for a very important reason. But I began to have a conversation with a woman. She was there with her son, who was in his 30s. She was in her 50s. And I asked her, when did you start having psychic ability? Because we were just talking about the UFOs. He had asked me, how many orbs did you see? Tell me about it. I told him what I saw. And I asked her, when did you start? She said, well, I didn't have this ability as a child, but when I was about 20, I was sleeping one night and I was zapped by an electric force. And then my life started to change. And she started telling me this story. And as she's speaking, I'm thinking everything she's telling me about what this entity that was communicating with her did sounds like what demons did in the Bible. They gave people the ability to read the future. So because I had met Christ, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I sat back as I listened, and under my breath, without looking like I'm praying, I'm saying, Father, please reveal the truth to her in the name of Jesus. Because by this point, you have to understand, I feel like there's power in prayer because I've seen a UFO pop up. Yes. Throughout my life, I've known that if I talk, something's going to happen. If I talk to God, I've seen a vision at the age of 8. I know there's something out there. If I talk, maybe I can make a difference in her life. So I'm praying, and all of a sudden she starts choking. She hadn't eaten anything.
Wow.
She's coughing. Her son pushes her a glass of water. She doesn't have a food allergy. And I said, are you okay? She goes, yes. I don't think they want me to tell you. And by this point, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on here. I have a 99.9%, as they'd say on the Jerry Springer show, of who the father is. I know who the father is. So I said, okay, under my breath, I just looked her and smiled, and I'm thinking, Satan, get thee behind me, jokingly, because in the church that my neighbor had taken me to, they were very charismatic. Not brother, but my husband is not from that background. But I thought, you know what? They used to say, if you encounter the devil, tell him, get thee behind me. Run or tell him to get away. You would probably call it rebuke, Joe, as they'd say in charismatic circles. So I whispered, get thee behind me. And she looked up at me and she said, I see a spirit behind you.
Wow.
And so I lean in a little. I'm thinking, okay, what does she see? The Holy Spirit? I don't know, because at this time in my life, I'm engaged in some sin. I've kind of turned away, which Christians can do. We're carnal people just like everybody else. We can go back into our old ways, especially if we have a childhood like mine, where you're exposed to everything on HBO and beyond. And I'm thinking, what does she see behind me? She starts talking. She says, his name is Carson. He's brown, leathery. She starts to describe what sounds like one of the alien beings that the woman who was traumatized had talked about. And I'm thinking, yeah, of course he's behind me. I just said, get thee behind me, Satan. So I'm sitting here having this conversation in my head, and I have this war going on where I'm wanting to tell her the truth about what I think about her ability and where she's getting this information from. But being raised on the West Coast, which is a blue state, I know that it's not nice to offend people. So I'm trying to think, what's a nice way to tell her that she's talking to a demon without sounding like I'm a know-it-all? Because in reality, I know that none of us are know-it-alls. We're humans. We make mistakes. No one has knowledge on anything that can be changed, in my mind, other than Christ and him crucified. That's the only reality that's real to me. Other than that, we can have a million different perspectives. Christ is the way. I've seen enough to know that. So I'm thinking, okay, this is demonic. But the war going on is, I'm at this conference for different reasons. I won't say exactly why, because I need to maintain my respect as a person who makes good choices. I've never done drugs, but there's this part of me that is knowing that I'm walking the fence, walking in sin, doing things that the world says is fine. Some of my friends say, oh, it's fine. But the Bible I'm reading says is wrong. So if I open up and start talking to her, I'm going to get the attention of all the people around her, and they're all from the UFO community. They're going to think I'm nuts because I'm talking about Jesus. That's fine. It's going to spoil the party. Maybe I should just sit here and be quiet and pray for her when I go home. I want to keep a good relationship between us. Maybe I'll continue to talk to her later. And not judging can be the best way of handling things sometimes, you know. So I continue to pray in my mind. And by this time, I get a text from my husband, when are you coming home? I'm thinking, okay, I should probably head home. I've been at the conference. It's nightfall. I need to drive 3 hours to get back home. I will take her business card. So I took her business card, shoved it into my dresser. I am a slob. I could probably find it if I looked through the dresser for about an hour. But one of my greater traits from childhood is being a slob. I shoved it in a dresser. I haven't seen it since, but I could find it if I needed to. And I chalked it up to nothing. But my point is, I began to meet people who were having experiences like mine. And their advice was, it had to be angelic. It had to be good. Some of them said they felt nothing but peace during these experiences. And I'm having this clash of, but there is a demonic realm. And I have people that I know. Remember, I'm from a family where they're well educated that say, oh, demons are real, are they? Well, show me one and I'll agree with you. And I have friends who are of different faiths, different denominations. And some of them say, okay, that sounds great. It's in the Bible, but does that mean that maybe it's literal? Maybe it's figurative. We don't know for sure. And so I always turn to them and say, well, if there are no demons, what was Jesus casting out? Thought forms? At the same time, I didn't have to ask the question of how to show them if demons are real, because I began to see them in the actual world. Now, these were not hallucinations. I'm completely sane, educated. I've never done drugs. I didn't start drinking till well after, and that was just once a week, a fruity cocktail. If a waitress asked me, would you like another? I say no. I've never been drunk. So where it got really interesting is where, and I won't say the name of the place that I work, but I will say that as an educator, I encountered many people. And my views do not reflect the views of the place that I work at. But I had a child once, I'll just leave it at that, a child that I know, I won't even tell you where, that said, I see a spirit behind you. Same as the psychic said. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing with me. I'm not going to get into religious matters because that's not my place. I have, as a professional, I have to follow the protocols. And I go on. The next day, something very interesting happens. Someone brings a cross, a child brings a cross, a very large cross, places it on a desk, asks if I can put it on my cart. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. We have to make sure everyone feels welcome. You can keep it if you want. It's kind of big. You can put it in your backpack if it's taking up too much space on your desk. Cut to a few minutes later when everyone leaves, the lights are off. And what I had been seeing during sleep paralysis, these black figures, one materializes, not a floater, an actual spirit being, transparent black silhouette. He's facing sideways. He's wearing a tuxedo. He has I looked up various hairstyles. I don't know how to describe his hairstyle, but almost Asian type hair, black, straight, walks across the room for a good 10 to 15 seconds, long enough to know that it's not a vision thing. It's not my eyes that are causing, it's not a floater. I'll put it that way. So I'm watching this spirit walk, and I'm thinking about the fact that a child told me that they saw a spirit. And then I'm thinking about the fact that the child went on to say, you know, my mother has seen these things all the time. So some of the things that I saw during what we would call sleep paralysis, same shape, same size, same entities, would manifest in the real world. So when we start to talk about whether something is from the demonic realm, I understand there are differences of opinion. But when I think about the fact that Christ was here, if he wasn't, we wouldn't have churches that were planted in India from the disciples. We wouldn't have churches here. Christianity would have died out long ago if the guy that died on the cross never came back. People do not die to support a lie. What's more important is a little ways into this, I actually had a sighting of Christ. I will not say I saw him in broad daylight. I was in my bed, turned to the side, not asleep, looking at the wall in a white robe, a glowing being. And I'm classifying it as Christ because at that point, that's what I thought. And he walked by and said, "You are sleeping." I didn't see his face. I wish I had, because there's so much argument about what he looked like in the Shroud of Turin. It would have been really interesting to see the face. All I saw was the robe, white robe. I don't remember the color of the sash, but there was a sash. And he told me I was sleeping. And having read my Bible, I knew that meant I was not doing what God needed me to do, which made sense because at that time I was completely obsessed with the UFO phenomenon. I was researching things that I shouldn't get into, occult, new age, just kind of toying around with it. Okay, there are these powers out there. This is kind of fun. And it got to the point where if I did something, and I didn't do anything that was breaking the law, I want to make that clear. There are different worldviews. There are things you can try as far as speaking into that realm. When I would do things that were in agreement with what the entities wanted me to do, I'll leave it at that, I would see more UFOs and more and more. I've taped them in the backyard. I've met people who have seen them. And at this point, when I hear stories on the news about, oh, you know, the Navy has declassified this or that, they always make it sound physical, but the things that I'm seeing aren't always physical. There was one where I kind of had some debatability that it could have been a drone. It was black, but it moved extremely fast, hovered to the side of the car. There were 2 black helicopters. This was in my hometown. And I was with my husband at the time, but he wouldn't look at it. I said, look, there's a UFO. By this time, he's kind of teased me a little. He doesn't believe in any of this. He said, you know, you need to stop talking about that stuff. It's crazy. I said, there's one right there. There's something there because of the way it moved. It wasn't an orb like the others, but it looked like the Pizza Hut symbol. It was floating. It had come from the sky, shot down extremely fast. I looked over, there were 2 black helicopters. So that's the only one where I thought maybe this is something military. The other ones, I'm 99.9% convinced that they're demonic, actually 100% to be completely honest. So going forward, go ahead.
At that time that you saw those UFOs, did you feel that they were there just for you?
That is a good question. I had someone ask me, a friend once, when I reported on Facebook, I've seen a UFO in my backyard. Where are you? Where are you seeing these? I kind of felt like maybe I was special. Maybe I had some special ability. Maybe I was calm, connected. Maybe, and there was even the confusion about, are these angelic? Because I'd read in the Bible, he maketh his angels flames of fire. Christ had been transfigured. That has to do with fire. They all have to do with light. But then I knew that there was this end times deception that could happen. And I also read enough about different worldviews to know that in the end times, Muslims have a belief that white lights will come down and light the faces of true believers, which in the Muslim religion, a true believer would be one that denies Christ. Because if you're Muslim, you can't
Yeah.
say
What
that
you said,
God has any partners. So
yeah.
there was a
What,
lot of confusion.
what you said when I asked that question, you said you felt special. You felt like there was some connection there. This is what I find most people who are in that UFO phenomenon literally have a thought. I need to go outside and look up in the sky. This happened to me as well. And sure enough, there'd be a UFO there. And going back to when I was, doing that myself, I did feel that, did I call that in or were they contacting me? I wasn't sure, but I did feel it was for me. And
Right.
it has a way of making you feel important or special or unique or can't really
Like
Chosen in
there's
some
like
way.
you've almost like you've reached
Yeah.
next level.
right.
And I'd
And
met
I
many people who
think,
would say, oh, you're at that
Enlightenment.
level. Right.
yeah,
You've raised
and
your vibration type of deal.
this is a huge part of that deception. Incredible. Yeah.
Yes. So the biggest conflict was, since I had met Christ and been baptized, and I was fairly rooted in the fact that I had believed in him at one point and was continuing to try to do my best to walk in the light, even though it was very difficult at times because of my background of being raised in a secular neighborhood and being exposed to certain things that imprint in your mind. We all have sin. We all have sin natures, even things that we don't realize we're doing, be it pride or whatnot.
Yeah.
So I eventually got to the point where I thought, you know what, if I can see these things, my children can see this. There are other people that see this. It's disturbing them. There's something I have to do. I've at least got to write it down because I'm getting older and I'm forgetting everything these days. Before we met here, I had to take notes on what I'd talk about. I think I've abandoned that list by now because I'm in the flow.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
My daughter goes, Mom, are you studying for a test? I said, no, I'm just making sure that I cover everything. But you talk all the time. No, I might forget everything unless I have a really good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So I thought I need to do something. I can write. I'm going to just write a book for fun. I'll just write about what happened, but I won't put my name. I will put my name on it because I'm bold enough to tell everybody I know what I've experienced, but I'll change the names of characters so that I don't make anyone look bad, so that I retain people's dignity, and so that it's a fiction story that people will actually want to read, because I think there's a lot of talk about how some people don't like nonfiction. That's very true. I'm one of those. I'll read it, but I gravitate toward fiction. So I decided I'm going to have to write a book. And it came to birth after about an hour of prayer, and it was finished within 2 weeks, the 500 pages.
That's very quick.
I sat at a computer for 16 hours a day, and I could not stop writing. I remember the prayer before I wrote it, and I had some tension in my mind thinking, okay, this is a topic that gets a little bit into areas that some believers may think are inappropriate, because the main character does have a struggle with sin, but I kept it PG-13 because I have children. I wanted anyone to be able to pick up the book and read it without feeling like they've contributed to something evil. So I began to write, and I could not stop. I prayed, Lord, would you please help me put into words what you need people to know about my experience and how it can affect them and how easily it is to be deceived. And I say deceived because I didn't talk to y'all yet about what I'd heard. I'm not schizophrenic. I have a memory of being in San Francisco with my dad. We didn't live in San Francisco, but 30 miles east of it. He had taken me to an auto show as a child, and I saw some guy punching the sky and talking to himself. And I thought, okay, that's weird. I've never had that struggle, never heard voices. I was pushing my children in a stroller. This is around the same time I saw the UFO at the mall. And I saw a man in the distance sitting down, and he struck me as different than everybody else. Being from a biblical worldview, I thought maybe this is an angel. It was just a thought. Mm-hmm. And so I asked telepathically, are you an angel? And within seconds, in my left ear, from a meter behind, this was not inside. This was not coming from inside. This came from outside. It sounded like a waterfall, a beautiful male voice, authoritative. There was no fear. And actually, when he started speaking, everything around me stopped. I remember I was pushing the stroller and I stopped because I knew that the atmosphere had changed. And he said 3 words, I see you. And at first I'm thinking, okay, I could interpret this a million different ways. Why would whoever's talking to me do that? I don't know what they mean. Do they mean you'll be in the ICU? You're about to get in a car accident? But then, as I stood there feeling this atmosphere shift, I got the impression that it meant I understand you. I'm connected to you. And I felt like I knew this person. I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, those of us that are mothers know the feeling you have. You know your child. You look into their eyes for the first time. You've known it before it was born. When my daughter was in my womb, I would feel her kick. The first time I looked into her eyes, I thought, okay, I know you, I see you, but this was deeper. This was beyond human, I see you. This is someone who, if they said, come with me, I would drop everything. I would leave the stroller, which is a horrible thing to say. I think I'm a decent mother. My mother was better, but I've poured into my children. And I thought, this is the type of person that could cause you to leave everything and go with them. So I was struggling with, how do I make sense of what I just heard? I pushed the stroller ahead. It stopped after 10 seconds or so. The atmosphere came back to normal. I pushed the stroller ahead a little more, went over to my husband and said, I just heard someone say, I see you. And he looked at me and went, what? I just heard something say, I see you. And by this time, he's heard me talk about the UFO. He's probably thinking, okay, what's going on with her? So being the caring husband that he is, he said, don't tell anyone you heard that, Stacy, you and your strange ideas, you and your charismatic ideas. It's the Jesus stuff. Maybe it's a demon. He kind of joked around with me. And a couple of weeks later, I was sitting in a movie theater with my brother watching Avatar. I have an appreciation for art, beautiful movie. And the woman, I don't even remember what happened in the scene. That's how horrible my memory is. But someone in the movie said, I see you. And I turned to my brother and said, oh my gosh, that's what I heard a spirit say to me. Now I'll say this, my brother was not a believer at that time. And he turned to me and said, you're nuts. But I shared openly with him my beliefs. And at this point, I've seen the phenomenon of UFOs. I've connected with people who've seen them. I've had experiences of what I thought was sleep paralysis, things manifesting in the physical realm, and most importantly, UFOs so close that I can't deny that they're real. When I hear people say they're real, part of me says, okay, great, next. Just as if you said, okay, an apple is real. I've tasted and seen that. So I began to put my words in writing. I had a friend that said I was going to put the entire book online for free on Facebook because I just wanted people to know the reality of what was going on. And she said, no, you do too much for free. You're always doing things for free. Just put it out there and sell it. And I thought, okay, it's important though. I don't want people to think I'm trying to get money off of this. It's an important message. But I went on to put it on and then went on a little writing spree where I wrote other books where the lights and the UFOs are involved in almost all of the books. But the book itself has caused some controversy when I've had book signings. I'll say that, and I'll tell you what I mean. I had my first book signing. I was encouraged to do so by someone that I know personally. She said, you should go out and do a book signing, meet people. I thought, okay, I'll go to Half Price Books, do a book signing for free. That's why I did it. And I began to see people come up to the table. They'd ask me questions about what my books were about. And I was approached by people from different worldviews. And I would get into conversations with them very openly and tell them about things I'd seen. And one pair of ladies said to me, after I told them about the ICU experience, one of the girls' jaws dropped. She was not a Christian. She said, I know she's telling the truth. She's telling the truth. And she's looking at her then partner, who's female. She's telling the truth. And they walked away. And I thought, okay, this is good. At least somebody thinks I'm not crazy, or she's being extremely nice. But I began to meet other people who would come up and share their experiences. And I talked to people. I've met people who are very credible people that tell me they have family members that have seen the lights, but they've never figured out what they were. They don't worry about it. I've had a close friend that I met who he had never seen UFOs. He was not a believer that I knew of at all. He said, I wish I could see one. And I told him, I don't know, I think this phenomenon is spiritual. It's related to the Bible, but you're probably going to see one very soon, because I think that God shows people things that he needs them to see to draw them to himself. The next day, he sent me an email saying, oh my gosh, I saw one, and a picture. And he wasn't joking. So the fact that people are seeing these more frequently, and I know many people of varying worldviews, the thing that concerns me most is the fact that there's such a big push by the media that this has to be physical craft with UFOs that are abducting people. And that immediately lights a fire in me that says, wouldn't that be a great excuse if suddenly people were to disappear? It's the UFOs. They've come up to take the closed-minded people and make them more conscious. it would be a great deception. And we have some document that was signed last year where the military or the government is supposed to declassify some things. That doesn't sit well with me because I know that there are always many sides to a story. So how will it be approached? What will people be taught? Will they think that everything they hear from that realm, because other people will be hearing from outside the physical realm, will they think that everything they see is necessarily good for them? And I know many people that say, oh, love and light, it's all good. We're all learners. I agree, we're all learners. But at the same time, when you think about humans, there are humans who make good choices. There are humans who make bad choices. Can there not be angelic beings who choose to rebel and who have the intent to cause destruction? So the biggest issue, I think, for me is that people call it closed-minded to consider this demonic, but because of my experiences, and I have not talked about all of them because being married, I discuss with my husband what he wants me to talk about, what he's comfortable with, and then I let that piece out. People I know personally, I share more with. There's no doubt in my mind that it's real, and it is. The phenomenon that is shown to us through the media is demonic. People being abducted, fear, destruction. It destroys their lives. I could count on fingers and still have more fingers left to count on other people's fingers, the number of people that say my life was destroyed after I saw the first UFO because of some world-altering experience they had that changed their worldview. Now, as someone who's a Christian, I pray regularly. I believe in the Holy Spirit. I believe in Christ. I believe he's alive. If I myself have struggled with some level of deception and being led astray, I always like to think of the story of Red Riding Hood, how she had a mission. She was supposed to get to grandma's house and bring her something wonderful, but the big bad wolf took her on a side route. Go and smell the pretty flowers. She began picking flowers and grandma was destroyed. Luckily, the huntsman could dig her back out, but we're dealing with people who are not just physical beings. And I know this because I've seen the spiritual realm. If we're dealing with beings that do not have our best interest, I think it's important at the very least that we talk openly about experiences we've had and we really measure out what Christ had to say about things that we encounter. Because in the scriptures, it's pretty clear. It says, test the spirits.
Yes.
He cast out evil spirits. There's something to this phenomenon. And not only that, I have had the opportunity to meet people from, like I said, different worldviews, some that practice Santeria. They're into Orishas, ancestral spirits, the very entities they're talking to, and they hear them, they see them, they're given power. There are people who make pacts. Just as when you become a Christian, you make a pact to accept the free gift. He gave everything, he asked for nothing in return. They make pacts where the more they give to the entity that they have been deceived by, the more power they have, and it's immediate power. Anyone who has been on earth long enough knows that if you have ever been a child, there might have been a time when you wanted something to happen and it didn't. Maybe you didn't want your parents to get divorced and they did. Maybe you wanted a red bike and you didn't get one. If there's a way to get things you want and you find that there are entities that can get them to you quickly, there are a lot of people who go for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to take the route of being judgmental and becoming a Salem witch trial type of individual who's trying to burn everyone at the stake. That's a heretic. Okay, this person's evil, that person's evil. I think it's more of, I have the perspective that God is on the side of everyone. He's trying to draw everyone to himself. He has our best interest at heart, but he's given us a free will.
Yep.
Yeah.
You choose life, you choose death. There are entities higher than us. I don't know this because I've read about it. I know this because I've seen them. I've heard them. I've experienced that side of reality. And if we have a free will and they've walked in dimensions that we have not yet been to, because this physical earth is not all there is, could they not make decisions that are not in our best interest? So there are all kinds of theological ideas about what these malevolent beings could be, where they came from, pre-flood. I've heard of Nephilim, I've heard of this, I've heard of that. But I will say, once you've seen it and you've had it walk into your bedroom and it has touched you physically, I can tell you with 100% certainty I've been in a room in my house where something has touched me, and I know other people where something has touched them. These experiences are happening to normal people, doctors, lawyers, normal people. It's not spoken of much in the Western world without scorn, but it's real.
It's true.
and it's something that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
So I could talk more, but I should probably leave some room for questions. I'm great at going beyond. I can tell you more, but I'll leave it.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
I'd like to take you back to that first major sighting at the movie theater. You're in your car, you have your kids with you, and I'm going to be Mr. Investigator that I am. And I'm going to take you back and I want you to relive that experience of that sighting. You said you followed this thing and you followed it to the movie theater. So take me through that step by step, as much detail as you can give me.
I'll do it like a writer. I tell you what I see, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling.
Yep.
To put you in the moment and not put you all to sleep. So
Right.
I saw the white orbs, drove over to it. I'll fast forward to the moment when I'm directly
Right.
underneath it
Okay.
in that parking lot of the theater that I did call later. I'm looking at this thing. I didn't have any fear. I've had people I talk to about having seen a spirit. Were you afraid? No, I don't have any fear of these
But
things. And I
hang on.
especially didn't have fear back then.
Why not? I mean, this is something that anybody else would be freaked out. I mean, it's not normal. You ever thought about that? It's not normal to see something so bizarre that you would have some kind of, maybe I shouldn't go that close to it, especially when I got my kids in the back seat.
Right. Not for a curious person, first of all. I'm very curious, and maybe I'm not normal, but I'm a very curious person. I had to know what it was. I was drawn to it. And secondly, I wasn't brainwashed by the media.
That's what I was looking for.
To be afraid.
That phrase, I was drawn to it. That's what I was looking for. Okay, keep going.
Well, a lot of times I'll hear stories about people and their thoughts about the UFO phenomenon, and they automatically assume it has to be aliens. People that I've known have said that they've seen them, that I've known personally. And I was not raised with any interest in UFOs, aliens. My uncle took me to a movie show at about the age of 8 or 9 where he wanted to go see Star Trek. And I fell asleep within the first 5 minutes. I thought, this is stupid. It's science fiction. This stuff isn't real. I didn't care about UFOs. I was into reading fiction, romance novels. That wasn't something that I had any interest in. So I didn't have enough background knowledge of the fear factor. It was just something new. So I wasn't taught by Hollywood because that wasn't the type of thing that I watched. I didn't read about aliens.
It's still outside of norm.
Our reality. Right.
Okay.
Now because I was curious, I just was like you in investigation mode. I had to find out what it was because I didn't know if it would ever come back. I thought I'd either figure this out now or not. And I was also having that issue with, look what happened to me when I was 8. I saw the same rotation pattern. That perimeter was rotating at the same rate of speed. So I thought there's something important here. I have to see it.
Okay. So you're underneath.
Right. It's pink. It's beautiful. I'm staring at it, thinking about how it looks a lot like the amoebas you'd look at under a microscope, living, swimming, fiery colors. I'm just staring and I'm watching it. There was no fear. There was complete peace. There was no sound. I'd considered, okay, if it's a drone, I could roll the window down. I can hear it. I'll see somebody operating it. Maybe I'll see lasers from the sky if it's some kind of mist that they've sprayed and they're doing some kind of a secret experiment trying to deceive people. Maybe it's a social experiment. They've sprayed aerosols and they're pointing lasers. So I stared at it. I looked around. I didn't see any lasers. I was just trying to put the pieces together. So I literally stood there in peace. I mean, if I could describe it, and when I do describe it nowadays, I always say it was beautiful. It was a spiritual experience because it was so amazing.
Did you roll the window down?
I rolled it all the way down. All the way down so that I would know there was nothing reflection going on. I could hear it. I watched closely enough to know that it was something entirely different than anything I'd ever seen. Nothing physical about it, period.
Did you hear anything with the window down?
Nothing. It was quiet. It was eerily quiet. The same level of quiet as when I...
Eerily quiet. Now, you're in the middle of a town. No traffic noise, nothing. No birds, no nothing.
Right.
What about your kids? No noise from your kids?
They didn't hear noise. I thought they were sleeping. It was silent in the back of the car.
Okay.
The radio was off.
Totally silence. Any other feeling besides that you can remember?
Complete peace, awe, looking at something, thinking, okay, this is phenomenal. I have to find the answer, which is why I did not sleep for 3 days straight. I was researching, trying to look up everything it could possibly be. So the only way I can describe it is
how did the passing of time feel to you?
I wouldn't say time completely stopped, although it did in the sense that I was in the moment. It was so quiet that it felt like eternity in a nutshell. This was it. This is where I belonged.
I want to share something with you. My mission all along has been to try to get the world to understand we're not dealing, like you said, with physical, biological, extraterrestrial entities, okay, from other worlds. We know from what we've experienced and these testimonies, being able to stop it in the name and authority of Jesus Christ, that we're dealing with a spiritual entity from a spiritual realm. It's just a matter of terminology, and as a teacher, you understand that it's just the vocabulary is this close for them to understand what we're talking about. They call it interdimensional, okay? And the UFO realm has been talking this for quite some time. Back when I did the conference in Roswell, I was the director of the 2008 conference for the city of Roswell at the UFO festival in 2008. Those speakers there were already saying this, that they were seeing more of evidence that this seems to be something interdimensional, not extraterrestrial biological, okay? That's this close to saying what Christians believe is a spiritual entity, okay? It's just a matter of terminology.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
Well, the evidence that we've been putting together with CE4 is to try and build that case through the testimonies and through the work we're showing that this is exactly what we're talking about. Well, in the secular realm, they're also building the case that this is interdimensional. There's a lot of case histories out there that they are showing that this is also not extraterrestrial biological entities. And I could send you a lot of information to show that. The Zimbabwe school event where 100 kids on the playground had this experience, that one will blow your mind. You will see that one has to be what we would call a spiritual nature experience, or an interdimensional experience by all means.
Right.
There's a signature to these events that's been recognized. And when you start looking at this, after I tell you this, and you go back and start looking at this in your research, you're going to go, oh my, because you'll start seeing this signature over and over and over. Okay? This signature is in your history. It's there. And I'm going to show you this signature. It's already been recognized. It's already been given a term, okay? A title. I've been dying to bring this out when you started with this. And I never heard this. I never expected you to bring this out. I never knew this was coming. But I've been dying this whole show to bring this to a head. And I'm going to show it to you. Because you described it. Okay? Now, this is something that I've actually sat in face to face with experiencers that have given this exact description of an experience that fits this to a T. All right? Now, let me send it to the chat there where you guys can actually read it. And I'll read it out loud. The Oz factor, a term coined by ufologist and author Jenny Randles, she's out of England, refers to the experience of being isolated or transported by the real world of everyday life into another environment, which is quite similar to the real world, but changed enough to be noticeable and disturbing. Such reports have been common in both UFO and paranormal accounts, but have been pushed aside, their evidential value being somewhat limited, until Randall's called attention to such experiences as a common element in some types of UFO encounters. Let me bring that to a full understanding. Okay? What she's talking about here is when these angelic entities, okay, manifest into our realm, okay, they can only manifest. When they manifest from the spiritual realm to our realm, they pierce the cosmic veil.
Which is so interesting because, can I interject? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I have to say something. There's a scene in the book where she mentions the day that the sky unzipped, but it wasn't the sky. Tabitha Monroe, my story.
Yes.
She puts a lot of emphasis on the fact that there was a definite day where something that was in another dimension, not another, from another planet, came into her world and changed everything.
Yes.
And I think you're onto something, as is the odds factor.
Piercing the veil. When they come through the veil, when they manifest, they are in an envelope. If you are in close proximity to that event, you get captured in that envelope. And every testimony that's been recorded has been described just like you described when I asked you the questions. Now, let me ask you one more question. Why title that experience the Oz factor?
Wizard of Oz, Dorothy.
What did Dorothy say?
Well,
there's no place like home.
Place like home, right?
There's no
I thought about
place
that
like
last
home.
night. Right. I didn't make that connection, sadly. I failed the
There
test.
you go.
Wow.
From your 8-year-old experience.
I guess that every time I've read Wizard of Oz, which is never, I think I saw the movie after I was 8, which makes it even more interesting. I always thought of that as a somewhat atheistic book. She's waiting for the man behind the veil to make himself known. She finally visits Oz and boom, he's nothing like what she thought. He's just a guy with some tools. Which
Isn't that
is pretty analogous with what the entities are doing. Pulling the strings, manifesting as whatever they choose to. I mean, years ago, they were gods. That's what all the world religions teach. You have, and I'm just speaking from a world religion point of view, the blue people in the skies that had wars with each other. They demanded worship. The witchcraft element where your ancestors tell you that you are God. You can tap into them. We're all going to the same place. And not to be judgmental, but it's all very anti-Christ because every single one of those viewpoints teaches that you don't need Christ. You're fine. Whereas Christ said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you die without me, you will die in your sins. So there's a pretty fine line there because every world religion, African, the tribes, and there's a story of the person that she went to go visit had actually been to Africa and visited with a medicine woman who spoke to him and told him some things that, we'll say it was psychic ability he received from that realm that put him on a path to win Tabitha's heart when he was already married. She was put on a path by the UFO experiences when she was already married. And when they get together, she spends a lot of time trying to convince him that what we're doing, this affair, could be dangerous. Think about how we met. Think about the end goal. What will happen if we do become soulmates and fly away together, leaving our families behind? Would it cause destruction? What would it do to the kids? What would it do to their worldview? Would it give an opportunity for the enemy to destroy them through drugs or alcohol because of depression at seeing a happy home be destroyed? So when you put the pieces together, you start to see that it's kind of a chess game that the enemy's playing. And the end goal is to kill, steal, and destroy. If you're married, he doesn't want you married. If it's a marriage that God approves of. If you are sane, he doesn't want you sane. If you're sober, he'd rather have you an alcoholic. Because the minute that you are rendered incapable of fulfilling your purpose, he's fulfilled his. So it's almost like freeze tag with kids. Let me go see how many people I can freeze so they can't do something that can stop my end of the scoreboard from taking down as many people as I can before my time is up. Because as a Christian, I already know whose side wins. I mean, like I said, I will not say I've seen Jesus, but I know enough to know that what he said is that he is the way. And there are people, entities, just as much as there are entities that did not want us to have this show today. There are entities that do, but it's a war, a cosmic war.
Yeah. And you've
For
read
each
the end
person.
of his, you've read the end of his book.
Right. And I think it's interesting you asked me how I felt. Was I afraid? When people say, are you afraid? The only reason I'm not is because I never bought into the alien stuff. I thought it was hogwash. And I don't want to be disrespectful to those that have seen entities, because if I can see what I've seen, that opens my mind up to the fact that other people might see it a different way.
Sure.
So if we're indeed in a cosmic war, one of the best tools that the other side has is convincing you that A, he either doesn't exist, B, he's not what he is. Think about a stranger when he comes in to molest a child. He's not going to come to the door looking scary. He's going to pull up beside her, offer candy, lure her or him in, groom him, make the child feel like he's on their side,
a friend,
build a connection, isolate the child from family, and then move in and make his move.
Exactly.
Which will ultimately destroy the child to an extent where it's really hard to get that child back to the purpose that the other side has, which is a beautiful future. So that's one of the reasons, Joe, that I'm so passionate about the book. And honestly, I've teetered back and forth between make it free. I have other books. This is too important. Yeah. And then my friend saying, keep it price. And I've dropped the price. But I think it's super important because I think I did a great job, partly because I've lived this story. So writing about it, my 8th grade teacher always said, write what you know.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say I'm on the level as any awesome writer. I do this for fun. I have a job. This is just for fun and for passion. It's something that I would never
Stacy,
go to
could
school
you
for.
show
It's
us?
just something I have to do.
Can you
The book?
please? Yeah.
Or talk a little?
Yeah.
Sure.
No, just show us the book and the title.
Okay. Yes. Meeting at Midnight. Now, just to not throw you off, I have a couple friends who said, Stacy, okay, first of all, I have my sister that called me. And my parents have since become born-again Christians. My sister is a born-again Christian. Stacy, why are you writing a book about an affair? Why is there alcohol on the front cover? You should be trying to convince people to stay sober. When I designed the cover, that's not a representation of the alcohol that leads to drunkenness. That is a representation of, in ancient history, when a man wanted to become wed to a woman, he would slide her a glass of wine. And she had to make a choice. If she wanted to be with him, she would sip from the cup. If she didn't, she could reject the cup. So it was kind of a representation of the blood of Christ. And at the same time, the main character in the book refuses to drink the wine that's offered to her by this other person that wants to win her over. And she really struggles with how to interpret this cup. Which cup should I go with? What Christ wants me to partake of, or the world wants me to partake of? So it is a thick one, but I think it does an excellent job showing people how deceptive this UFO phenomenon can be, because you get into reading the conversations she has with people, conversations I've actually had with people. For example, when my children were younger, there was one incident where I wanted them to meet other kids. So I joined a group online, meetup.com, and I thought we'll have little play dates with kids. We showed up to the first meeting. There was no one there. The second meeting, we struck gold. There was a group of ladies, very interesting ladies. One of the children of these women, this is one reason that I changed a lot of the names, had some special abilities. And my daughter, upon playing with the little girl, started to talk to her about what she had seen. And I started to make a connection. Okay, here we have again where it's not just adults that are experiencing things. The enemy can manifest to anyone he so chooses. And there's a struggle for me as a believer. When something happens, I never assume that it kind of annoys me, I'll be honest, when somebody says, oh, I heard from God, or I felt, because I think that things are based upon your perception, first of all. I would get really angry when I was a teen and I heard somebody say, well, the Lord said to me. Did he really? Did he say it audibly? Do you feel it in your heart? Because I wanted to know the truth. If he said it to you audibly and it was true, Give it to me. Tell me what you think he said. But then there's also human nature. People can lie. People can make overgeneralizations. I don't want to, it's pretty much a game of what to believe, worldviews, what's most important. So I think one of the aims of this book was to show people what's most important. In the end, she meeting at midnight, because at midnight she ends up meeting someone very important. And I won't give away the entire book, but by the end of it, you're taken on a journey where you learn the power in what the enemy is trying to do. That's the way I see it. And the power in what Christ has already done in defeating his purposes. So it's not just a book to me, it's more of a mission. And you talked about people wanting those types of experiences. I never wanted this type of experience. I never wanted to see UFOs, didn't desire it. I do remember one instance where as a teen, I think I was 19, my grandmother had passed on and I went into the backyard. I wrote this scene into the book, but changed the character to another person. And she looked up at the sky and she said, "Can you show me a sign? Show me something from the other realm, but don't make it scary."
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me at times goes, okay, did I ask for this because I asked for a sign? How much of this is from God? How much of this is from the enemy? It is if you're a critical thinker, it can be a battle to figure it all out, just as it is with life. But I'm going with what the Dead Sea Scrolls say. God is not the author of confusion. If there is a tried and true answer, that's what we need to pay attention to, and it's Christ, period. There are many perspectives. It's Christ. And one more story if we have time, a quick one, just to show people the power of words and our connection with the Creator. I was with my kids. This is when they're a little older. By this time, they're in elementary school. I was driving down the street and I saw a woman that had a sign. She was begging for money. At the time, I didn't have any cash on me because like you probably don't carry cash around. I don't. Everything's cards these days. So I thought, okay, I feel kind of bad. She needs help. I can't help her. She was standing by a store. So I stopped the car and I said to my kids, guys, sometimes when you want to help somebody and you can't, God can. So I closed my eyes. I said out loud so they could hear. I'm trying to make a teachable moment here. Father, if you have it in your will for me to give her help of any kind, you need to make her show up in front of a church in the next week. We're driving around. The same woman is in front of a church the next week, a church that I've been to many times. Great church. But at this point, just like the character in the book, I've kind of left myself open to floating between denominations only because I know that God is not closed-minded. He's a big God. And I've always worried that having not been raised in the church, if I go with a denomination, if I follow the teaching of man, I'm not really doing what Christ said. We don't have to follow anyone. He has the truth. We don't. Mm-hmm. We can have him, but we don't know anything. He does. There's no judgment for people. When I see someone that's doing something I don't agree with, if it's written very clearly in the scriptures, I'll pray for them. If they ask me for my opinion, I'll tell them. But the only thing I give them is love. And I have the opinion you should never turn someone away. You should never hurt someone. If you're really doing what Christ did the right way, you're all about peace. It does not mean compromise. You don't have to agree with people. You can be very adamant about what you know is true. But at the same time, the enemy can use denominations, walls as a dividing factor when the words of Christ were, let them be one. So I think not only the UFO phenomenon, but just our own human lack of omniscience can be a barrier. So we have to depend on God. We have to know what's out there. We have to understand that just as there are humans who make bad choices, there are angelic beings who have existed before we did that do not have our best interest at heart. And I think once people understand that, or later on, once more people start to see that, at least they have the story of the truth. Just like I would have had no idea how to filter my experiences had I not had a little bit of meeting with Christ because of people that invited me to hear the gospel.
Amen.
So what worries me the most is malleability of people and their ability to be deceived. Even I can be deceived. That's why that experience I had where the being said, I see you. I tell people it was beautiful. I like to think it was from God, but every day I ask God if that's important. You can reveal it to me. I'm not going to get sidetracked by that.
Right.
Yep.
I take it with a grain of salt, because if that thing that spoke to me told me to do something or led me astray, by the time I figured out that it wasn't on my side, it might be a little too late. So I think we have to be really careful to keep in mind that deception is a real thing. And
Yes.
it's something that has to do with humility. We have to understand that we know nothing.
Mm.
It's bigger than us.
Yeah.
And I don't mean we know nothing as in we have nothing to believe in. We know who to believe in. We know who died. We know who was resurrected.
Yep.
We also know that God is love and that his mission is that no one should perish. So I kind of keep those things in mind when I'm dealing with people who have differences of opinion. And my father, my parents have since become born again Christians, when he first heard me talking about UFOs, he'd come out to Texas to visit. He said, "Do you know Jesus?" He was a little concerned because he heard me talking about UFOs. And I said, "Yes, but this is real." So even in the church, there are differences of opinion in the church. There are just differences of opinion in the world, period. But when it comes down to it, we're all connected because we're all loved and we're all able to be deceived. So I think what you're doing, Joe, is amazing. You need to keep it going, because one day somebody that heard the truth is going to look back on what you said, and it could turn them in a direction that could lead to their greater good.
Yep.
Instead of their
Absolutely.
destruction.
Yes.
All it takes is talking to a few people who have seen the UFO phenomenon and they have been destroyed by it.
Sure.
And I've met some.
Yes.
I'm not saying every light in the sky is demonic, but I'm saying it exists and it could be.
Yeah.
So we have to be realistic and wise as doves.
Yes.
Is the easiest way I can say it. So,
Okay,
thank you,
question.
Joe, for what you do. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the book that you've written. You've saved me from having to do one. Hey,
I will say, yeah, go ahead.
do you have it on Kindle also?
It is on Kindle. It's on Amazon. If you type in "Meeting at Midnight" on Amazon with my name after it, it will pop up the book. There are other authors with the same name that write books that are actually occult phenomenon, vampires.
Okay.
I actually had someone try to attach one of their books as mine. I had to call Amazon and say, "That is not mine. I don't know who put that out there." The things that they're writing about in their books are the same things that I'm writing about, but they think that those are good and I think they're demonic. So they took that book off my page, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yes, Meeting at Midnight is on Amazon. I may eventually do an audiobook, but that would take hours because the book is so long. So for now, it's on Amazon out there for people to purchase.
You know, I got to make a comment. You mentioned a couple times the term cosmic war. I got to let you know that I'm working on 2 more books, the second book and the third book. The second book, the title is actually Casualties of a Cosmic War.
We could all write a chapter.
Yeah.
Some of us more so than others, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
That's actually what we're doing. A lot of the members of CE4 are taking a chapter, and we're going to do it as a group.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, definitely applicable. And when you think about it, I mean, there are so many differences of opinion when it comes to end times, and people have their perspectives on things. But when you put the pieces together, boy, does it make a lot of sense that the entities that called themselves gods at one time are now here, not even necessarily as aliens. It could shift to a higher form of consciousness.
Sure.
Who knows? When information comes out about people having seen these UFOs and how classified it was and what it was, half of what they're saying could be lies. But it's going to come out eventually. Lying signs and wonders.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
when it does, boy, can it destroy people. So I think we need to begin telling people what's happening, just like you would prepare your child. Look, you're walking to school. I remember when I was 5, I walked to school alone. I wouldn't let my own kids, but my parents thought it was safe back then in the 80s, before the milk cartons with kids' pictures. And I remember walking, hearing my corduroy jeans swishing. And I saw a red car one day as I was walking toward the elementary school. And I thought, that person might try to hurt me. I shouldn't go that way, because my parents had talked to me about the fact that not everyone has good intentions. So I think the fact that we're saying not everybody that looks friendly, we're warning people, is not a sign of closed-mindedness. It's a sign that you love people and you care enough to tell them the truth. They might hate you for it, but later on, when they see that red car and they see other people being snatched up and they see the destruction that ensues in time, they'll put the pieces together. So I think with prayer and with us having the winning side, because we know that Christ has already defeated the enemy, we can have quite an impact. I love the verse in the scriptures that says, the elect could be deceived if it were possible.
Yep.
Could it be that Christ cares enough about his sheep that he's putting the word out now so that if some of us are taken and some of us are left behind, we're not going to be deceived because we've been told the truth.
Exactly.
Whatever shade
Stacy,
it comes in, we know what to trust. So I appreciate you.
Exactly. Stacy, this has been one awesome show. I am so glad that I came across that one little page and that one little comment that you made. I mean, this has been just one awesome get together, and to be able to hear all of this. So you're going to have a great future. Like I told you, I have lots of connections with lots of podcasters. It's time to get your story out there. This had to be a godsend for both of us to be able to come together and to help you and get this out there to where a lot of people can have their hands on it, not just to read a dry, scientific type of book that I might have put together.
A real story.
A real story that's entertaining and also truthful, and some people just, they need that kind of truth to
I always tell I've had family members call and say, why would you write yourself into a book? I remember when that happened. I told them, this is my story. I'm writing it in the way that I feel would be appropriate to get the message out there. So I'm glad that I ran across your site, and it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't seen that pink disc, because when I went on researching, I read something about CE4. I saw a story of a woman who had seen a light hovering over her child's crib, and I thought, this is the same kind of thing that I'm seeing. And I saw that you had a lot to say about the name of Christ, and I thought, you know what he is saying works. I tried that the other day with the entity that was choking me, and boy, did it make him disappear. And then later, having seen the entity in broad daylight, 2 + 2 = 4. Pretty simple. I thought, okay, he's got a point there. And some people would say, Joe says it's testimony, that's not scientific. I'm sorry. Since when did a person's life not become scientific? If this is happening to people, it's real. There's truth quantitatively with numbers that's measurable and observable for a scientist. And there's truth that's qualitative. If I said she has a white shirt on, someone else might think it's pink. That doesn't mean it's not white for her. So it's happening to people, and we just need to get the truth out, because I think that's the will of God, is that people are not deceived. And for not only that, but that people know the power they have over these entities, not in their own power. There's nothing special about me, but the power that Christ has.
The scientific part that really gets them is it's supposed to be repeatability. Yes. Well, the thing is, for those of you that are watching, I've got hundreds of testimonies that have people that have been able to stop this experience, terminate it from their life from ever happening again, through a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. If you are having these experiences, your life is upside down, you're being tormented, okay? We can help you. I've got testimonies that will testify to that. That is repeatability. That you will find nowhere else in the UFO community anywhere in the world. Nobody's been able to call down a flying saucer a second time, okay? There's no repeatability in the UFO realm, except right here. You want it to stop? Give us a call. We'll help you stop it.
Yeah, we can also
Thank you, Joe.
Send you a questionnaire. We can help you that way to look into how you've opened these spiritual doors, how this is affecting you. We can look at your family history, how it's coming through those doors as well. And as Joe has said, we have a recovery and discovery, the 8 R's to freedom. This is the method we use. This really helps people. This is proven to work. And if you need help, give us a call, email us. We'll get onto it.
One last thing to close out the show. Corey, you've been working on a lot of avenues to get this information out there. And Stacy, you're going to be on these same avenues. Just Corey's going to put your information, this show, your book out there on the same avenues. Corey, give us an update on what you've been working on.
Well, I've been working on Twitter and brand new shoot, and what was the other one called? BitChute.
Yeah.
Okay.
BitChute we're not having too much success with at the moment, but brand new tube. The videos are going up at a good rate of speed. Twitter, it's been up for a few days. I already got like almost 20 tweets up, and
That's awesome.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
Well
good.
done.
we're
Corey.
expanding and moving forward.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's awesome.
We'll get it out there. And Stacy, I'll get back with you. I've already got 2 shows lined up with you right away, and I'll put you in contact with those podcast hosts. They're looking forward to you.
Okay.
So yeah, this is going to take
Perfect.
off for you.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Thank you so much.
glad we can help you get this out there. It's a
I'm glad.
pleasure.
Yes.
Thanks for
Yes.
coming on.
Thank you,
I'm glad that
Stacy.
accident happened that
Oh,
we
yeah.
met, because boy, oh boy, when believers come together, truth tellers come together, it can really have an
Yeah.
impact. So
Yeah.
thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Lee. Yes.
Thank you,
Alrighty.
Stacy.
Thank
God
you.
bless you. All the best.
Thank you,
and
you as
God
well.
bless all the
God
viewers.
bless.
Thank you for tuning into the Piercing the Cosmic Veil Show. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.